Hey there again, family. This is your brother and friend Adrian with the Millennial Man Podcast. And as you can see, I am joined by a very distinguished guest, Dr. Nathaniel Wells. And as you can see in the description, we are speaking about the very clear challenges that are facing 21st century men. Before I move any further, please let me introduce Dr. Wells, who happens to be a man of God who is clearly on a great mission. And I'm so honored to follow his lead as he is the pastor of Rebirth Christian Center International. He has traveled about 40 countries, written close to 40 books, and he has really raised up a lot of men, strategically reasoning behind our interview today because he has a lot to share. And I'm so excited based on even our own relationship. He has been a very key ally and father in the faith and in many other areas. And so today, I really would love to introduce him. Dr. Wells, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Awesome, Doc. So today, Dr. Wells, we're seeing in this particular environment, this is the 21st century, there are so many challenges scoping from society to church to family. And we're seeing more and more those target points are leading back to men. And I, as you can tell, have a bone to pick in that fight because I'm very interested to help men, and I know you are as well. And so I wanted to ask you, Dr. Wells, in our first question, what in your experience can you say about modern men today that in their lifestyle or their living? Why is it so difficult for men today to find their purpose?
I really believe that many men are struggling with their purpose because they're trying to define it based on scenarios that were given to them or possibly environmental variants that they've been shown and not necessarily something that they have composed themselves, and they've not created a narrative conducive for their growth because narratives have to be created by the author of the actual narrative itself. So if I've not given authorship to my own narrative and I'm allowing others to write my story and for society to define my story and for society to give me grabs or some type of ideology around what I should be. And based on stereotypes and based on what I've seen possibly growing up or around me, if I don't write that narrative, I think that it's very hard to get the pen of editing to really get into the script itself, to edit out what you don't like if you allow someone to always be in charge of the pen. So I think you really have to write your own narrative if you're going to really be a man of purpose and live authentically yourself.
That's very incredible, and rightly so, Dr. Wells, because we're born into whatever world we're born into, and a lot of us are exposed to, or we're predisposed to the environments in which we are developing in. And as you said, we are literally given a script. We're given a script, and whether that script is good or bad, unfortunately, for many of us, we're experiencing a lot of debilitating things. Dr. Wells, I'd love to follow up on that. Speaking about writing the script, there are so many men right now listening to this conversation, and if I even dare to say women also, because in my world, as we say, if it's about the men, it's all about the women, and I can't help but asking, how can a man literally having grown up in a very dysfunctional environment, change the script? What power does he have to change the script?
I always say that culture binds your personal power. And sometimes men that have been culturally bound and culturally restricted based on age or ethnicity, socioeconomic backgrounds, lots of it has to do with you actually escaping the narrative, if you would, or the what I would say, get out of the fairy tale that you were written and start creating your own story. And taking charge of that, you're going to have to emphatically, in so many different ways, find out exactly the damaged parts of the old version of yourself, because it's going to be very difficult to be who you were and who you're going to become at the same time without getting to a defining moment. And I think those moments that we have in life as men, those moments mean so much to us. If we don't fall in love with our moments, learn to embrace our moments. If you have a crippling moment, a sad moment, a happy moment, enthusiastic moment, a celebratory moment, those moments typically define the next chapter. And every page begins to flip from experiences, but moments are an annex to every chapter that starts. And when we fall in love with moments and experiences that we're having, we're going to really debrief from the negative woes of yesterday, because if we don't have a picture of, and sometimes really getting out of sync, and your question with coming from a background that's negative or possibly negligent for growth, we get to that point of having to really realize exactly what you're looking into, because, you know, as the scripture says, that Paul says, I look into the glass darkly. And sometimes what you look at, you don't necessarily see as clear. Things don't really look as clear because we don't have a picture of it. And I would say, you know, my one of my favorite technologies, social technologies, is mentorship. And lots of times men have issues identifying forms of mentorship. And sometimes we get into a dogmatic form of mentorship because some in times past, I think men that feel as if their ego is busted, or a mentor might say something that ensnares their ego. They feel as if, you know, I've got to back away from this guy because, you know, he's getting me in trouble now, and I don't feel as if, you know, I'm the man, the man here. You know, he's chopping down at my masculinity, and a lot of times because of that, men have a hard time finding out that, you know, I'm not actually losing myself or losing my manhood. I'm learning who not to be anymore. Obviously, if I'm, you know, and mentorship is an opportunity to listen to wisdom. And so if a person has already been where I'm trying to go at, and I'm trying to get on a street called straight, and I have an opportunity to listen to wisdom, and the person begins to give me the opportunity to kind of look over their shoulder, so to speak, and see how it's done. I can't try to compete with the person that I'm trying to become, or I can't compete with the person that I'm learning from. And that's the competitive side of men that gets us back to that negative side. Lots of times growing up, you know, in atmospheres or environments that were not necessarily conducive for growth, lots of younger boys are taught the competitive side, but they're taught it in such a negative way. They're not taught it in a very mechanical way, how to actually be used in society. They're taught how to be authoritative, but they're not taught how to be placement oriented, learning where, when, and how to place that authority. You know, a good fire uh, fire is hot. We all know that if you put your hand in it, you're going to get burned. However, a fire out of control will burn down an entire forest, but a fire under control can cook a good pot of stew. So I think that we have to get to the point of understanding that, a lot of younger guys are like that fire out of control, and they've not been given a placement in learning how to actually hone in on not having to be, so to speak, all of that. You can be all of that. You're still fire. You're still hot. You're still what's in. But you've got to get to the place of understanding, hey, I can hone in all that power, all that authority as a man. I can hone that in and actually do something effective with it instead of ruining everyone's life, including myself.
Wow, you said so much there. I can't wait to go back and digest all that, because you in a very subtle way, you literally you spoke about how important it is for us to be intentional about moving from where we are, not being able to control where we're coming from or where we originate. You use the word exactly this way. You said the escape. There is an escape that has to happen, and that prevaricates that it is going to be a challenge. It's going to be an urgency. It's going to be, if I don't get out of here, this could end me. And I love how you place that urgency in there, because a lot of people, they're hearing you speak and they're like, well, I don't know. Well, you don't have to know. You just have to come into one with what you realize is not good for you, and recognize the thought that this is not good for me. I have to get away from this. And I so agree with that. And you really talked about how us not getting out of those places of stagnation, it really destroys others. Not only are we we are the only ones declining, but it really makes a very bad transaction when those who are in our lives, whether it's our female counterparts or sisters or moms or wives, and a lot of people may be thinking geographically, escape, run away, go to a different town. It doesn't necessarily have to be that either. It could be escaping a mindset, escaping a mannerism, a proclivity that is bad, and it's so loaded, and I can't wait to go back to really dig into this stuff, because that's why I love talking to you, Doc, because you open this thing up, and I know based on your psychology background, you are literally going into stuff that is documented. You have added to the body of knowledge in this form, I'm sure. And so you're not just speaking from a whim, you're literally speaking high level stuff that if we listen line by line, precept by precept, a lot of us are going to get so much from this. I love it. From your own personal experiences, Dr. Wells, can you, let me say it this way. Can you track back to different points in your life where you saw specific developmental points in your life that you realized the light bulb went off? I got to escape. I got to move. I got to do this. Tell me more about obviously you did go through those processes, but tell me more about what happens to a man when he gets to that crossroad. This may be a crossroad for him. He may be hearing us. He may be wanting to hear this. Nobody else is talking about this. And all of a sudden, these guys are talking about this stuff. And I want to know, I'm at this point in my life. What do I do? What were some of the developmental places in your life that you realized, hey, I got something here. What can I do now?
I think I was always wired a little bit different growing up. And I never settled for the status quo because I recognized I always had expensive tastes growing up. And I came from what some would consider below the poverty line, or we weren't necessarily on the streets impoverished, but we were very, very impoverished growing up as far as income base. We were, you know, we at some point, just the job, coming from a single mom home, working 2 and 3 jobs, I realized that I kind of had to put on my big boy shoes on real early and kind of start taking on responsibility. And what I'm grateful is that my mother allowed me the opportunity to kind of flex that power. And for women that could be listening right now, I want to encourage that, especially if you're a single mom, don't kill the spirit of that little boy, because there's a man in there. He's not developed yet, mature wise. He's not developed based physically wise, but there is a man in there. And so man-like instincts and masculine instincts, they start kicking in at different ages. And the one thing that grows masculinity or masculine maturity are areas of responsibility. And when there's too much responsibility added to something without the adequate process of learning how to process the experience, it produces frustration. In psychology, we call it acute stress response. Another common phrase is fight or flight response. And it's to the point where your adrenaline starts driving and you start getting to the point of thinking, well, I can't handle this. So I've got to just go ahead and give it up because this is too much for me and I'll never be able to handle it. And, you know, you get frustrated, you want to go in a corner and cry. And I got to those points growing up. I got to those points without having in home with me. Yes, I had mentorship around me. Yes, I had strong men around me, but there's nothing in comparison to the actual man, an active father being in the home with you. There are some men that are in the home, but they're not actively involved. They don't administer to the emotional context of their children growing up and the affirmations that are needed. Everyone needs affirmation. Doesn't matter if you are 3 or 63, everyone needs affirmation. Everyone needs pouring into, everyone needs to be told how well they're doing. It's just a part of the human experience. And when we get to that point of understanding that, you know, as young boys are growing up, one thing that I can recall developmentally was the pressure that was put on me, the financial pressure. I realized, you know, here I am at college and high school graduation, and I basically had to find a way to get to graduation because I had a piece of car that was just barely holding up. I mean, everything was going on with that car, and I found a way, you know, before it broke down all the way, found a way to say, you know what, I got tired of, you know, having to depend on a broken down car, barely working, just to get around, not knowing if I'm going to be able to crank up, you know, scared that, you know, let me carry jumper cables and a jumper box just in case, you know. And I think that we get into a place of survival mode when we come out of impoverished backgrounds, and we come out of socioeconomic backgrounds that are not necessarily conducive to the blue or white collar American or European, African, those that are around the world that could be touched by what's going on. We don't necessarily, everyone doesn't grow up rich. Everyone doesn't grow up middle class. Some of us actually came from the lower class, and escaping that, I think it was the pressure to get out of survival mode so I could actually start living. And one of those things is I knew I had to push myself. I didn't have a male to tell me, hey, go to school, get in college and get in the books and get your grades so that you can go ahead and get this degree. I didn't have that. I didn't have someone on me. Usually there's a disciplinarian in there that would, you can't do this until until you finish this. You can't do this until you wash the dishes. You can't do this. You can't go there. You can't go there. And what I had to do is learning how to practice self-discipline, because I was always so motivated. But I think pain was my main asphyxiation of driving me out of that crippled place in life and that crippled mindset, to get to the place developmentally where I was able to get myself into a place of self-discipline and saying, you know what, I'm not going to settle just for mediocrity anymore. And so I realized, because I was so driven, and still today I'm so driven, and I thrive to get things accomplished and get things, and I can stay up, sometime late at night until I get something accomplished, because I know that I cannot afford to make myself lose or let myself lose, because if I don't finish, and I don't finish well, and I don't do something and fulfill my very best in it, I know when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to feel defeated. And I hate feeling defeated, knowing that I could have given it more and I didn't, because I chose to be lazy with life. And that's the one thing that I've learned to be driven in. So developmentally, my response is I had to be driven to thrive my own self, and get to a point where my why had to be defined as me getting out of survival mode, to a life that I can actually look back on and be proud of.
Incredible. That's incredible. You mentioned survival mode. And I look back on my own life, I realized even in my earlier stages of development, how much it was all about survival mode. And I believe a lot of us men, especially on the younger spectrum, can agree that the very fact of having to be able to provide for a family or live up to the expectations of those in our circle, or whether it may be even at work, the peer pressure effect, it pushes and drives us to get to this point of we just can't fail at no cost. Can we fail type of deal? And while that is good, you rightly mentioned sometimes that even promotes a lot of pressure and even mental pressure and stresses that pushes us to places of dysfunction. And you not even having, in your case, a father figure in the home, you bumped into the fact of who you were because of a couple of run-ins with, feeling defeated, not being able to get it done. You recognize quickly how, you could flip this, not by just being in survival mode for the sake of being in survival mode, but using the adrenaline, the push, the oomph, the vigor to really get you to that place, even if it costs you staying up late. And I believe a lot of us men, we get to the point of survival mode, and when we fail, then we just stop. When we fail, then we just sink into the circumstances that are around us, and then we attract the labels. Oh, he's a deadbeat. Oh, he's no good. Oh, I don't need him. Oh my gosh, that guy. What is he doing now? What is he up to now? He's no good. He doesn't get stuff done. He doesn't finish whenever he starts. We see this so much in our societies. And I'm so happy that we don't have to think anymore that it's going to all come together overnight. It does require some amount of challenge and effort. And I'm so happy that you called us out, especially those of us who, are lazy. The Bible speaks about the spirit of slothfulness, So it is incredible hearing your feedback on this, because I've always wondered, why is it so challenging? Even in the escape, you've done all that you're supposed to do. You've ran and you've caught something and you're running with it, and it's almost like everything is following you. It's almost like every bad experience that could ever happen, it happens. And I'm so happy that you gave great clarity in that. And so Dr. Wells, as we are transitioning into another phase of the conversation, can you speak to specific people, you not having to call names now, but as you were growing into a man, developing in purpose, were there specific people? I know you gave a broad example of, I overcame and so forth and so on, but I'm sure somewhere in there you got influences from other people, particularly men, who were able to get you to that point of encouragement. You said every little boy has the spirit of a man in him, and no matter what the circumstances is, not only is that spirit going to come out someday, but that spirit is attracted to a certain posture, a certain stature. What was that for you? What was that experience like for you?
I wish I could lavish going on and on and on about, great men that I just, fell at their feet and just learned everything on. But the truth of the matter is, I got most of my inspiration from my pastor, and my pastor and my grandfather. For the most part, I never forget, the times that they would just pour into me and just give information. And grandfather, being, we went to church on one street, and then his church was on the other street. So I would walk back and forth. I would go to Sunday school at their church and then come to our church. But for morning service, and I learned so much from him because he was a businessman, such to a point, and he had multiple businesses way back in the day, and so that gave me a depiction on what I could be. It gave me something to reach for. He was a pastor, but at the same time, my pastor that was at my home church, he was a family man and a man of God. So my strong points I got from my pastors, and what I could say, and I got both sides of the beam, knowing that I can be a family man, so be around family, be surrounded by family, but at the same time be a businessman. So kind of my own story of the rich versus the poor. My pastor didn't necessarily have, drive the finest car, but my grandfather did. He had always had a nice car. So I began to see, and they were friends as well. So I began to understand that you could be both. You could be a businessman and a pastor. But you could also be anointed. You could also travel. You could also do great things. But as far as outside of all the great examples outside of them, I can't say that I have, a plethora of men that I can. What I can say truthfully and honestly is that most of my examples of men, I learned what not to do, because I grew up in a neighborhood in a city that some people would probably flinch their eye at if they knew and looked at the street that I used to live on and the house that I used to live in. I went back some recent years and took a picture of the old house that I lived in and the old apartment that I lived in, to just remind myself as a keepsake, this is where you came from. This is the street that you grew up on. This is the street that you escaped from. And, back in the day, I came from a very there was crime. There was, just like any other city, inner city youth that's out there. I grew up seeing it all. So my first example of, seeing men around the home were, the people standing on the street corners, and, seeing men basically to be so drastic and so overt with women, that, you could have, the example was you could have a bunch of them, and you don't have to commit to any of them. So that was outside of church. From on a day-to-day basis, I got to the point of realizing, wow, so this is what you can have. You can have this one and that one and that one and that one too. And when I got into realizing, I'm so grateful for my example in church from my pastors, because they preached and taught and reared us in the fact that, no, you are to be committed to one wife, and you're not to cheat. You're to be with that one. And I think a lot of men, back to a question from earlier, a lot of men allow society to define that narrative, thinking that it's okay because I don't necessarily have to commit. And especially with the topic of being that, talking about the millennial man, a lot of it has to do because the millennial is a culture of men. I realize that, modern days, that there are lots of influencers out there that, a lot of men get their examples from. Their rappers, and there are different celebrities that a lot of men look up to because they father absenteeism, and they get their examples. They're not necessarily in church like I was, so their examples are the biggest pulpits they can find, and their pulpit is in the world. And they find it on TV. They find it on different genres of trying to find out a way that they can actually, be better than who they are. They know there's something in them, but you have to look at the greatest influence in your life is the greatest mentor in your life.
That's incredible. And you made a very, very clear point about the experiences that you had of men were those who taught you what not to do. And I think sometimes we miss those teaching points. It's obvious that, that guy running around doing what he's doing, life's not as fine and dandy as he makes it to be. What about that guy who, for example, he's a criminal, he's a career criminal, I'm sure when he's trying to live a regular life, he's looking over his shoulder, figuring out who is going to blow my brains out, so it's easy to express the bravado and, that, as you said, mainstream gangster or, womanizing type of function, but at what cost? And I guess we can see what happens at the end, whether is it that he's going to wind up with multiple children all over the place, or he's going to be responsible for the deaths or injury or hurt of people in one form or another. Just imagine what he has to live through, the post-traumatic stress disorder. We talk about Paul in Bible study all the time, and we understand that Paul at some point in his life had to endure the post-traumatic stress disorder of all the people he probably had to kill in the name of the government system before he got converted. Formerly Saul, but became Paul. In his conversion, a lot of us, especially today with the mental health crises that we see happening around us, it is attributed to those same societies and same dysfunctional issues. Myself included, we grew up in environments that were, we saw crimes. We heard the gunshots. We experienced the trauma, the mothers who cried. We saw the young teens who got pregnant out of wedlock, not finishing college, not finishing high school. And all of this, looking back, God, when you look back at that and the remnants of that, while there are success stories, and praise God, while there are those who rise up out of that, who escape, the vast majority continue to spiral out of control. And it's the same narrative that continues to be repeated year in and year out. And I'm so grateful that by prayer, by learning and following the word, we have an alternative. We don't have to stay there. And it drives me to our next question, Dr. Wells. So for many of these scenarios like we just explained, the gangster, the murderer, the rapist, the felon, somebody who just walked out on his family, he has a record today, and he's looking at this and he's wondering, I hear what you're saying, but my life is messed up. There's no future for me. How would you advise somebody in that category?
We cannot, back to earlier, we cannot allow culture to define us and society to define us. And so in order to move forward, I'm going to have to literally take charge of whatever past mistakes. I've got to accept the fact that because mistakes were made, I can't, I used to think, well, let's just go ahead and erase and pretend like it's not there. No, I've learned to embrace my scars. And until we learn the embracing of scars, being basically a depiction and a fossil of what we've come through, our scars are literally going to prove us. They're symbols that we've been to war. And if we have no scars coming out of a war, and we have no wounds, we have no abrasions, then we don't have, as we say, skin in the game, because we realize that I'm not going to be able to be an effective example to someone and base my explanations from experiences if I have no experiences. And so I've learned to embrace those bad experiences, the past mistakes, the past failures, couple those up. There are some people that have records that cannot get state certifications and state licensures. However, what I've got to do is learn how to build alternatively. If that's someone that possibly is listening today and feel as if this is just over for me. I can't do this, and I can't do that, and I can't do this. Find out what you can do. And when you discover what you can do, become an expert in it. Do everything that you can do and become an expert in it. Because life didn't just give you lemons. If life gave you lemons, guess what? Go pick some apples and bake you an apple pie. So you don't have, just because life gives you the lemons, go ahead and sometimes life didn't give us the lemon. Sometimes we picked up the lemon and start chewing on it. We just didn't know that we had to peel through the rind before we got to the juice, and a lot of people are suffering from the bitter parts of the rind that they've been grinding on all these years. And they've not gotten to the juicy part of it, knowing that, hey, I can really enjoy something here, but eventually, and if you've been given some lemons, you might just be able to keep the lemons. Just mix some sugar with it so you can drink it, and allow that to understand that I've got to process everything that comes, everything that goes. I've got to learn how to process that. And I talk about process a lot over and over and over, because there's a lot of people that really don't, they really don't like process. They like the start and the finish. They don't like the in-between. And the in-between is what catches so many men. I can't get from being an ex whatever I was into a pro whatever I'm going to be without process. It's going to take process, and it's going to take being educated. It's going to take me actually getting to a place and finding out the parts of me that are damaged. I've got to do assessment at every stage of the journey. If I don't assess the damaged parts of who I am, I'm going to end up re-damaging the same area, because I have no feeling there. It's become numb. And I think that's what a lot of us get to the point of. We literally get numb, and we get to the place that we're so numb in an area until we keep beating and hitting a certain area within us that we don't even know the damaged parts of it, because that's the soft spot that we're okay damaging that area, because it's never going to get healed. Nobody's going to ever touch it. And if anyone dares addresses it, we know it's there, but that's just our soft spot. We blow that fuse, and that's our soft spot. We back into a cave, we back into an excuse, and we say, hey, this is me, this is my pain, this is my wound, and I'm protective over my wound. Don't touch it because that's my soft spot. Much like, if you've ever broken a rib or ever had a sprained bone in your body, it's sprained. But if somebody else comes up and touches it, just the smallest little touch of a broken rib can bring a grown man to his knees. So the intricate parts of us and the softest parts of us, if it's touched just at the right angle and just at the right place, doesn't matter how strong you are all over, that one soft spot will begin to bring you down to your knees. And I think that is the proverbial way of why a lot of men are allowing society to hit those soft spots over and over, and they're not shielding those soft spots until they get healed. So I got to shield off those areas within myself that I know that they're there. But the first part is I've got to get out of denial. And I can't deny that they're there. I can't get into a place denying that issues are there, that shortcomings are there. When I get to that place of saying, you know what, I messed up, I did this, I've got to own that. And when I own that, I get into a place of being honest with myself. The worst person in the world to lie to is you. Because at the end of the day, for a fact that it's still a lie. But a lot of guys, they get to a point of accepting the lie that they've told their own self because it removes the cognitive dissonance. They don't have to deal with the trauma. They just pretend that it's not there. Again, that's that fairy tale. They accept the narrative that was given. So they even create a false narrative sometimes. It's an alternative narrative that we create because we don't want to deal with the reality of where we really are. And I think that's the key point on how to actually break the rules of society and create the new rules of success.
Oh, wow. Again, so much said there. I'm talking about, self-sabotage. Do what you can do. Don't grope and moan and on the things that you can't do. Accepting where you are. These are serious points that a lot of us we don't even dare to look at because we have accepted, as you've said before, society's constructs, society's labels, and for many men out there who have messed up, this is what they're leveled at, and they wind up going back through the cycles. They're going back through the familiar territory and not accepting what they have to deal with. Doc, has really been the greatest thing to really cause them to break down others around them. I love that answer. And I believe someone listening who made a mistake, who made a series of mistakes, can really re-listen to that and really pick themselves up, because that's what this is all about, for us to be to be advanced in our manhood and not necessarily stay down as society would want. Another question is pretty much on the flip side of that. So this is the bad guy, so to speak, who messed up, he made mistakes. What about the regular Joe? What about the regular guy? Dr. Wells, who's doing all the right things. They did what mommy and papi said to do. They went to school, they got the degree, they're married, they're doing well, but they feel like they're not moving. They feel like they're stuck. How do you move from the acceptable place of society, the status quo, in yourself that you're not where you really should be? How would you advise that man?
Well, you've got to get to the place as we mentioned earlier about that narrative. I've got to actually take down, and I can use as an example, the degree and the success is oftentimes used as a trophy. And I've got to begin to really assess, who did I get the degree for? Who did I get the certification for? who did I start the family for? Was I living out someone else's expectations of me? And sometimes their expectations are good. We have a good life from it. We can, we got good credit. We can, get a nice car, a nice house, got a nice job. We could do this, we could do this. And yes, it's going to use, but it's the cookie cutter. I think with the average Joe and the guy that meets and gets to that place that society will accept as quote unquote success, I think that guy has to get to the point of understanding his own creativity. And when you have been given such a cookie cutter lifestyle to live, many of times our creativity is limited. So we don't get in touch with the creative side of us. We had to live out the plans and expectations of others until we've not actually created something ourselves that we can marvel at in our own eyes. And I think that for the most part, the average Joe is going to have to tap into their creativity and say, you know what? I can't just be normal. I can't just be the normal mediocre guy, that just has a successful family, but I've got to get to the point of, and you may find yourself in that place. And sometimes, it's within one track that you find out alternatively that, hey, I'm actually not interested in that. I got the degree in this, but I'm not interested in that. And guys that are generally forced into a place of living out the expectations of someone else, by the time they actually start discovering themselves, their children are grown and they're 40 plus. And finally, they hit what society calls a midlife crisis, and they're trying to revert back to teenage years because that's where they stop living. They start living for everyone else at that age, but they stop living for themselves. So they revert back to 16 and 17 years old, and you're trying to figure out, why is this 50-year-old man, all of a sudden interested in go-karts and playing video games and doing a little, because that's where he stopped living at. He never furnished the conversation with the little boy in him, because every little boy has a man in him, but every man has a little boy in him.
Incredible. And you know what? One thing I noticed with all these these answers to these questions, they're all similar. All these responses are similar. There's just one man out there. And I know some of us who are listening based on our own category, what if it's me over here? What about me? I hear somebody right now listening, asking, what about me? Hey, you got your answer. And I love how Dr. Wells, it cracks me up. Sometimes we make this thing so much more difficult than it needs to be. Where's the creative in you? What do you have deep down inside of you that goes beyond your job or your career? That drives you, and you'll do it without even getting paid, and it doesn't even matter. What's that key piece of you? And I believe, Dr. Wells, this is where a lot of men are missing out, that creative piece, that piece inside of them. For me, exactly in my case, when you encouraged me to write, I was like, yeah, okay. But until I started to write, I did not realize that there was something deeper inside of me. And so there are many of us who will write. There are many of us who will develop products. There are many of us who will develop patents for devices that could save lives. And depending on what drives you, I know for me, being in the church, being developed in the ministry as a minister, it really is a powerful place, because everything that's inside me, as it aligns with my God-given mission and vision, I can use it anywhere. I'm an encourager by design. And so, Adrian, what do you mean? Dr. Wells, what do you mean about finding that creative in me? It's that thing that it doesn't matter what environment you're in, you can use that thing. It can be harvested. It's almost like if the entire world as we know it today was to end, If they put you somewhere in Dubai or in Africa or in Jamaica, that gift could literally be harvested and put you right back at a place where you can look down at everybody else, not in a condescending way, but because you have managed to develop yourself. And we say this in parentheses because not many people, Dr. Wells, know how to find this place. And as we call it in the Millennial Man book, the God-given mission and vision. It's almost like you can't fail. Jesus in his right, Dr. Wells, and you can elaborate on this way more than I can. It was so powerful, even in his death. Even today, we're talking about the mighty power of Jesus. And as a pastor, Dr. Wells, could you just shed some light on how powerful it is, to really tap into the God-given mission and vision that men could use to really literally launch off out of wherever they are right now?
Genesis, I love the book of Genesis because it really gives the foundational piece that a lot of men are missing and seek for lifelong. And the book of Genesis, God, he chose to name, he chose to give a description to mankind in the earth realm. And he named him, he named him the translation Adonimus, which we put in short in the Anglo-Saxon language as Adam. But Adonimus or Adamus means diamond. And he's a diamond in the rough. But however, he gets to the place and God gives him the permission to be a creative in the garden. And he says, you know what? I want you to name the animals. I want you to name the trees. Birds will be the birds and the fowl of the air. They will fly. And, the domesticated animals, they'll praise the ground, and the fish of the sea, they'll swim. And so he gave Adam the creative ability, a man. He gave him, and Adam was born literally and created in the first millennium. So the actual millennium started, the first ever millennium, the first ever day on earth, and man's date, his birth date, his man date was fulfilled. And wow. He came into who he was, his creative ability, his mandate. He couldn't tap into his mandate until he started creating. And when he started creating, wow, he literally gave he gave the ability to Adam, to Adonimus, whose name means diamond. He gave him diamond. We recognize is the highest ranking gem on the planet. There may be some that are more expensive, but the diamond still outranks them in popularity and poise. And so we recognize that the diamond, because it is so hard, it has the ability to scratch against surfaces. You can scratch a diamond against cement, and still the diamond is going to shine. It is because it's been processed, and it's gone through the process of chiseling. It's gone through the process. We've got to understand, as pretty as a diamond is, and as great as a diamond is still a tool. And there's an Adam in every one of us, because we are from his seed, we're from his lineage. So there is a creative inside of us. We're made in the image and likeness of God himself. Adam, he's literally a mirror image of what God says. I want to let us make man in our image and likeness. He had a conversation and says, you know what, we're gonna make man. We're not just going to speak man. We're not going to Photoshop man. We're not going to Xerox him off. We're not going to carbon copy him off of someone that we've seen browsing. We're not going to make him look like one of the other animals that's on there. As a matter of fact, the animals don't even have an identity just yet. We're going to create man We're going to put everything else there, but we're going to create man. And because man is is the result or the outcome of a creation, we can help nothing but to be a creative. And so everything that we do, it literally comes out of the glands of creativity. When you're not creating, you're not operating as a creator. We are gods in the earth realm, little g, and he is our heavenly Father, the sovereign God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, God, big G. But we are made in his image and his likeness. So everything God wanted to do in the earth realm, he invested that into Adam. And he says, you know what? I'm going to give you identity in the earth realm. And because there is an Adam, there's an Adamus, there's a diamond in every one of us. That's why we rub against the harsh parts of life, because we are diamonds. The harsh parts of life are what defines the diamond. If it rubs against nothing, it's still going to be in the rough. We find diamonds in dirty, rough clay type environments. They're just a dirty looking rock until they're chiseled down and shined. We love shiny diamonds. But if you would just, most times we look at a diamond, when miners are looking for diamonds, and it just looks like just a normal, just a clear type, opaque type little rock, like a lump of coal, if we could compare to. But they realize it looks dirty right now, but I've got to process and refine it. I've got to rub it against some stuff. I've got to bring it so it can experience some resistance. When I do that, I actually get to the point of bringing that God-given creativity out of me, because God himself allows situations, issues, people, relationships, bad experiences to rub against me, to define me as a real diamond in the rough.
Oh, and if you need more of teaching and preaching like that, shameless plug, Rebirth Christian Center International is your next stop, because this is the type of stuff that we are learning, and there's no turning back. It's nothing wrong with Daniel in the lion's den, but when you begin to walk from a different perspective, and as Dr. Wells began to dig deep into the creatorial power of God and the true intentions of God, using the diamond as an example, and as the subject matter, as Adamus was an actual depiction of a diamond, and the characteristics of the diamond, how it can etch into hard surfaces and still shine. That is the concept that I always subscribe to, that the men are God's secret weapon in the earth. They can be suppressed. They are produced under pressure. But you know what? We carry the seed. And that's significant, because without the men being the backbone and the structure, everything in society collapses. So goes the society, so goes the family, so goes, unfortunately, in this generation, we're seeing even some parts and fractures of the institutional church have been being hit. And we cannot continue to function as though this is a non-issue. We must begin to deal with this. And that's why interviews like these will help men and even women, as we're going to ask a follow-up question for the women. What can they do? These interviews are going to help, because this is, as I've always said, mission critical. We have to know who we are. And Doc, I know most of these men, all of these men, they are part of a family somewhere, whether they were birthed from a mother, or they are a brother, they are a husband, they are a father. What would you say to the women? What can they do, and how can they approach men as men are finding themselves? This young wife just married to her husband, still pretty much, in college in his mind. But as you said, society gave him the cookie cutter concept of success, having a degree and all that good stuff. And he thinks he's all there, but he has dysfunctions. he has dysfunctions that nobody else sees, that only she sees. And she's suffering depression right now. She doesn't know how to deal with this. What would you say to her? Not only from a general perspective, but I want your pastoral care in there, and I want the psychological in there somewhere as well. I'm going to tap into those because we want to have this conversation from a place where we're not just generalizing. I want us to realize that this has a core effect on the spirit man and even on the person as an individual.
Out of my head first, psychologically, and then out of my spirit. But psychologically, I realize that there are women that come to the table with expectations, and generally their expectations of a man is what they've seen to be the perfect man. And much like men, women also have a depiction of what they would like their man to be like. They would like their, be like this one and be like that one and be like that one. And they get the expectations of what they desire in a man based on what they've accumulated. And so what they do, most times women will allow a man psychologically, will allow a man to think that he's in charge, just to allow them and give them the assurance. But she know at the end of the day, she still run the show. And that's simply to the fact that there are a lot of women that, of course, they realize when they are attracted to, what they're attracted to are the qualities inside the man. Lots of, and that's not someone that's just trying to date, for a quick little fling, but someone that actually wants husband quality. They're after the qualities inside of him. And for a woman, psychologically, what you can do is prepare your own self. When you find yourself into a place that you are limited, your own self, and you feel as if, if you're not ready to get married, don't get married. When you do get married, it's going to be the best decision and the best ride of your life, but you've got to make sure that you're prepared. If you know that you're not emotionally there, if you're not emotionally, don't get married and then expect that man to fix you, because he's got pressure on him from society. He's got pressure, of course, as family. He's got pressure to be a breadwinner. He's got pressure against other men, of course, as well. So don't expect the man to fix you. You come to the table with your stuff together, so to speak, already. And whatever is broken inside of each of you, when you put it together, you help each other get fixed. So your love for him is going to fix him. That's the one thing that you can do that's going to fix him. And you can't necessarily, with the man, you don't have it is not within us. It's within the hands of God to fix his heart, to fix it. So you can't get well, if I do this and I do that, that'll change him. And I do this and that, it's not going to change him. That's why you could try and try. It's not going to change him. Your love for him, your overshadowing love for him is what's going to change him. Most of the time, psychologically, a man needs to know that you actually appreciate him. That's how we're wired. If you just show that you appreciate us and you appreciate the effort that we're doing and the effort that we project out, just by appreciation and love, care, and concern, that enough says, you know what? I'm not just working hard to take care of someone that just doesn't care and doesn't appreciate. They actually appreciate what I'm doing for them. They actually appreciate me trying. May not have the millions and billions to live in the big mansion just yet, but I'm trying. And your love and your encouragement to him is going to do so much more than anything that you could try to do to fix him. Now, out of my spirit, as a woman, what you can do to prepare is make sure that you're a praying woman. The Bible says that a wise woman buildeth her house, Proverbs 31. A wise woman buildeth her house with both of her hands, but a fool plucketh it down. And also says in Proverbs that a man would rather be on a rooftop than to be in the house with a nagging wife. And you don't want to be a knife, you want to be a wife. Don't cut him up and spit him out and show him. Don't embarrass him in front of his friends, and don't embarrass him and wait until he gets in front of his mom to try to embarrass him or to, because you know that's going to get at him the most. And don't get to the place where you hit that soft spot, that broken rib. Remember, as we talked about the rib earlier, God put Adam to sleep and took out a rib. You are his soft spot. So what affects you is going to affect him. You are his soft spot. And so if you use your soft area in him, he took out a rib up under, look physiology, when they count the bones of a man versus a woman, look who has more bones. One was taken out of us literally because you are a soft spot as a woman. God, he put it within us to be caregivers and to be lovers, to be providers. That's our God-given nature. It just won't leave us. No matter, even in the wild, even a male animal is still going to have the instinct of taking care of the pack.
Yes.
It's just our God-given instinct. It's what men are wired to do. God just wired us like that. So don't try to take that away from him and say, I can do it. I don't need you. I don't need you. When you tell a man that, you basically say that you stole from me. You got my rib. You got my heart. And I don't know what to do without you. That's why we go crazy when you don't communicate with us and you shut down on us. When you hit our soft spot as a woman, it hurts. Why? It is because you've literally got us. God gave us to you and you to us. So you got our hearts. You got one of our ribs. We cannot do it without your affection. That's why we're most of the times more concrete and we're most of the times less emotional, because you are our emotion.
No,
You're
that's
the spring of our emotion, and you are the fragrance of what we want to look forward to. And so all you have to do is get to the point of understanding your place is not to necessarily be stepped on and be stumped on. Your place is to be his expression, and loving him and expressing yourself to him. Guess what? God wired you that way because he took a rib out. We don't feel that. You don't notice this and you don't notice that. No. Why? You got our heart. You feel it for us. And so that's why we walk in sync so well together. God created man and woman to go together. And anything outside that, and I know it's modern day, but anything outside that, if you look at it, it does not work eventually because it's not wired to.
Absolutely.
If you have too much emotion over here, or if you have two that have no emotion over here, it's going to be very difficult because there's going to be a clash there. God gave us a balance being, and that's you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is incredible. Hey, I'm telling you, this is the type of stuff that we need to get our arms around. Dr. Wells is breaking down the relationship piece in such a clear-cut way. And this is just a little bit. This is nothing close to what we get at church, because it's so much more. And you know what? And because of your experience, clinical experience, talking to couples and men and women alike in these scenarios, you're not just blowing smoke. This is real world stuff. And I'm very, very excited that people are getting the opportunity to hear it here, because this is this is very important to why a lot of relationships don't work. And as you've alluded to, anything outside of a man and a woman is a very, very hard sell. And even more implicitly, even a man and a woman, and the emotions are switched, the woman operating as the man. And Dr. Wells, you talked about the knife, not the wife, the knife. And I know there was a time you talked about this particular fish that has both female and male genitalia. And the aim of the fish was to literally eat the man. The female version of the fish would eat the man as soon as they were satisfied. As soon as they got impregnated, or they got all the rights to procreate, the man would be cannibalized. And I believe that was a perfect picture of what we're having right now. And as we would agree, I grew up in a single parent home, and I know that in some ways you had that experience. We want women to grow. We want our daughters and our mothers to rise and to shine. But there is a very, very fine line when we're talking about one surpassing the other, and there's a struggle. And I believe you are so on point with this conversation. And the final thing I'd like to ask before I let you go, I know we have a very busy schedule, is how would you advise a man to future-proof his life? Putting together all these groups of men that we've been talking to, how can he future-proof his life? And I'm talking future-proof in not just specifically worrying about his 401k or the stock market. See, these days the stock market goes up and it goes down. It's or what he owns, or his job, his career. We put our trust in these things all the time, and they fail us, and that's what we keep tying our worth to. How would you advise a man today to future-proof his life?
My greatest advice would be to make sure that you're practical with yourself, because if you build a false narrative and your expectations are just to wham bam and boom, it's going to be done, it's not going to necessarily happen. But I would definitely always advocate to embracing process. If I can embrace process at every level, what do you mean by process? Embrace the actual learning curve. Embrace the time that you don't know, the time of development. That's the time where you get to make the mistakes and not get embarrassed. And that's why it's also important for good mentorship around you. Good mentorship is going to be able to point out some stuff to you that you don't necessarily see yourself, but you'll be able to thrive in based on what the different areas in your life that you're actually looking for it to go into. So to be future proof, I always have to look from if you look from the future and you live from the future, you're basically backing up into your future. You've already been there. You've already seen yourself there. So if I do that, I've got to have a vision for my life. And if I plan out a vision, I've seen it there. I created it there in the future already. So by the time I arrive there, I'm literally just arriving to what I already saw. Mm-hmm. So if I constantly live 7, 5, 6, and 7 paces ahead, I'm always going to be ahead of my competition. And you get to a place where you don't have competition because you're always ahead of them. You can't outdo your competition. You have to outthink your competition as a man.
Ooh, wow. Blown away. This was so powerful. And if you're listening to this, please go over and listen this about 7 times because you're going to get so much out of this. This is a gold mine. As a matter of fact, this is a diamond mine of information and revelation and clinical narration that is being unraveled right here on the Millennial Man Podcast. This is needed, gentlemen. This is needed, ladies. Why? Because we're living in a time when life has taken a turn. For some, it's taken a turn out of control. Everything is happening so fast. The norms and value systems that we've grown up to believe in are no longer holding as much as we thought they could and should have hold, because now things are moving so fast. We're not even having time to reflect on, what was taught by grandpa or great grandpa or our daddy. We have so much information coming at us at lightning speed. And as Dr. Wells spoke about his pastor and his grandfather, being key members of the fundamentals of his development, I encourage men. I read a book the other day. I was listening to a podcast, and there's a gentleman who wrote the book about men, why men don't like going to church. And the numbers were startling. Almost 70% of men are absent from church. And that is bad by any measure. And the numbers aren't getting any better. And we're seeing why we're having so much dysfunction. It's not money that's going to make us better. It's not fame. It's not success in the context of what society says. It's not any of that. All of those will come when we're properly developed and the God-given mission and vision that we're after becomes in center stage, and it goes into the crosshairs of what we're doing every single day. But we are seeking, many of us, after the wrong things. And by virtue of this, we have lost our way. But thank God for men like Dr. Wells, who for me personally has been a guide, has been a mentor, has been someone who has led me in my walk. And God knows there have been many instances in my life where I've had other leadership structures in my life, but never have I seen or have I experienced a leader like Dr. Wells, who has really taken life from a whole different level, being skilled and being an expert in so many areas, dealing with people. He reminded us the other day, if you are in this Christian pastor or minister thing, your primary goal is to understand how to deal with people. This is a people business. And a lot of us, we're so excited about going out there and showing how well our gifts can be displayed. And we forget about the people who God wants us to be assigned to. How can they learn? Unless there be a preacher. Hey, Dr. Wells, thank you so much for being here with us. If there are any final words that you'd like to share, please do so. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to have just a sit-side discussion with you, and coming here onto the Millennial Man Podcast. There's so many valuable nuggets that we could have gone over today, and so many things that I believe that we can grow from. But as a last notation, I would always say, put it to use. Don't just be a hearer, but actually be a doer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Myself included. Dr. Wells, it was a pleasure again to have you. Thank you so much for listening to the Millennial Man Podcast, family. Please share this with a brother, a friend, a father, a cousin, an uncle, anybody. This is important to their development in the millennial age and the 21st century. And again, in our world, if it's about the men, it's all about the women, and we grow better together. God bless you. This is the Millennial Man Podcast with yours truly, Adrian Young. And today, my guest was Dr. Nathaniel Wells. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.